How realistic is it for Tanjiro to be able to carry his sister for long distances in a box on his back and then engage in a life-or-death sword battle at a moment's notice? In a show with demons and magic breathing, it's Tanjiro's carrying ability that has bugged me for 6 years. Now, he's definitely in shape, but he's not the biggest guy out there. We can actually find out how tall he is from the Demon Slayer wiki, 5 foot 5 inches, or 165 centimeters, and he weighs 134 pounds, or 61 kilos, so he's not exactly Kratos. From the same source, we're told that Nezuko weighs 99 pounds, or 45 kilograms. So that means I weigh about 2 Nezukos, with maybe one of them carrying a gallon of milk. Although she can shrink herself to fit in that box, so that probably cuts down her weight quite a bit. To figure out if Tanjiro could really carry Nezuko and then flip around like Yoda with a lightsaber, we need to answer 2 questions. First, how much weight was Tanjiro used to carrying? And second, is it reasonable for someone of that size to carry that much weight over a long term and then perform a physically demanding task in real life? To answer the first question, we need to talk about how much coal Tanjiro could carry in his basket. At the beginning of the story, Tanjiro's family makes their living by chopping down trees and burning them to make charcoal. Tanjiro then loads up his basket and trots down the mountain to sell the charcoal to the townspeople below. In order to calculate how much Tanjiro's basket of coal weighs, we would need to know the volume of the basket and the weight of the charcoal. And fortunately, we can get a pretty good estimate for each. If I use this shot here, then I can get a reference for the exact scale used in this picture by using the measurements for Tanjiro that we got from the Demon Slayer wiki. 1 Tanjiro equals 165 centimeters. I can then use that scale to measure Tanjiro's basket and calculate its volume. If I use this line to measure Tanjiro's height, that means we have a line that is 165 centimeters long. I can get a pixel count for that line using the super advanced technology of Microsoft Paint, 921 pixels. So each pixel in this shot is proportional to 0.18 centimeters. To calculate the volume of Tanjiro's basket, I need its height and its radius. If I draw a second line to measure the height of the basket, then I can get its pixel count, 413 pixels, or approximately 74 centimeters, using the scale that we got from Tanjiro's height. To get the radius, I'll draw a third line to get the basket's diameter, get the pixel count, and divide that in half. This gives us a radius of 28.9 centimeters. I'm going to make the argument that we can treat Tanjiro's basket as a regular cylinder, because even though the basket is tapered at the bottom, there's also some overflow that sticks out above the top. So whatever sticks out above the rim would roughly fill in the gaps at the bottom of the basket to make a cylinder. The formula for a cylinder's volume is base times height, or the area of the circle at the bottom times the height of the basket. If I follow this formula, then we end up with a volume of 0.19 cubic meters for Tanjiro's basket of charcoal, at least as it's drawn in this shot. The next step is to figure out how heavy the coal is, and this is easier than it seems. If this was actual anthracite coal, it could easily weigh over 800 pounds per cubic meter, which would crush Tanjiro like a bug. Although, if that happened in this show, he'd probably just get up, start breathing a little differently, and be fine. But charcoal is much lighter. To make it, you have to burn wood at a very low oxygen level, often by burying it or covering it with sod so that it smolders but doesn't fully catch on fire. It's basically pre-burned wood, so it gives off very little smoke and was therefore a popular choice for people to use indoors. I actually found a site that would give me the approximate weights for different types of charcoal based on the type of tree that was burned. The weight for charcoal ranges from 100 kilograms per cubic meter for spruce at the low end, up to 195 kilos per cubic meter for beech trees. There appear to be a few different types of trees near Tanjiro's house, and in this part of the world you could expect a lot of birch and a lot of pine. My guess is that Tanjiro's family makes their charcoal out of pine trees, since they're plentiful and easy to work with. 1 cubic meter of pine charcoal weighs between 130 and 140 kilograms. If we combine that information with the volume of the basket that Tanjiro carries, then we should be able to estimate the weight of Tanjiro's basket of charcoal, between 54.3 to 58.5 pounds, or 24.7 and 26.6 kilograms. There are a few things to keep in mind with this estimate. The first is that we're dealing with drawings of a fictional subject that never existed. These are not photographs from real life. This means that there are going to be slight size differences for Tanjiro and the basket, depending on which shot we're using. There's also a margin for error based on the human element of how closely I can make the measurements. It's also surprisingly tough to find a complete shot of Tanjiro carrying the basket on his back. Most of the ones that came close would either cut off the bottoms of his shoes, or they were from the side and didn't show the full basket. In both cases, I had to make my best guess where the actual edges were. To make up for some of these drawbacks, I decided to use 5 different shots of Tanjiro to see if they gave an average basket weight that was relatively consistent. And it turns out that between these shots, 4 of them had a volume of either 0.18 or 0.19 cubic meters, which is some impressive consistency on the animator's part. There was one outlier shot that ended up at 0.22 cubic meters, which would make Tanjiro's pack about 10 pounds heavier. But this is the shot that I'm the least confident about my guess where Tanjiro's feet ended, and it also obscures quite a bit of the left side of the basket. So I think we can say that on average, the show depicts Tanjiro carrying somewhere between 50 to 60 pounds of coal, or between 23 and 27 kilos. This means that Tanjiro was already used to carrying a little over 50 pounds for long distances, even before Nezuko became a demon. But could someone of Tanjiro's size really carry this much for several miles and then fight a life-or-death sword battle? You might hear 50 to 60 pounds and think, that's not heavy at all, I could bench press way more than that. But carrying packs over long distances is a different thing entirely, and experienced hikers know that you'll feel every pound in that pack. This is why when you look at a lot of endurance events that require covering distance while wearing a pack and then performing some physically demanding task, the pack weights can seem relatively light, often around 20 pounds. The Ruck challenge, for example, is a team-building exercise for those who want to test themselves by trekking through mud, obstacles, and difficult terrain while carrying a pack on their backs. The point is to finish the race as a team with no one left behind, so it prioritizes teamwork over maxing out your individual limits. But even the more demanding Ruck races use a pack weight of 30 pounds for people weighing more than 150 pounds and 20 pounds for people weighing less than that. Keep in mind that many of the participants in these races are civilians, and there's often more of an emphasis placed on endurance and distance traveled rather than just the sheer amount of weight carried. The Ruck Heavy might have a 30-pound pack limit, but you're carrying that pack for 40 miles. Other rucking challenges that I looked at use similar weight requirements, though I did find it interesting that many of these races allowed entrants as young as 16 years old, which is close to Tanjiro's age at the start of the show. Combat soldiers in modern armies are typically expected to carry 60 to 70 pounds during a march, though depending on the soldier's responsibility, they might carry significantly more, with some troops needing to carry well over 100 pounds if they need to transport specialized gear. So while Tanjiro's basket of charcoal is similar to what a modern soldier in a rifle company might carry, carrying Nezuko may have been more similar to a rucking challenge due to her ability to shrink. The Demon Slayer wiki doesn't give us a definite weight for her transformed size, but it says she can become as little as a small child, and she fits easily within the basket that Tanjiro carries. We don't know exactly how heavy she is at that point, but this is a pretty significant transformation. To find out what a small child might weigh in Japan, I found some charts from a healthcare company on the typical weight and height of female Japanese children based on their age. And it turns out that most of them hit 50 pounds at about the 7-year mark. This seems like a decent upper limit for what I would call a small child. So I'm going to say that the weight of a small child in Japan would probably be in the ballpark of 30 to 50 pounds, or between 14 and 23 kilos, and probably closer to the lower end of that since Taisho-era people weighed less on average than modern Japanese. This would bring Nezuko's shrunken weight more in line with what someone in a real-life ruck might carry before having to perform a demanding task, such as scaling an obstacle course or slicing through a demon's limbs. If anything, carrying a slightly heavier load with the coal basket was training Tanjiro to carry his sister later on, which must have felt like a breeze with the lower weight, even factoring in the box and his sword. So while there are plenty of things about Demon Slayer that require a healthy suspension of disbelief, one part that seems far-fetched at first is actually well within what a human could reasonably do. Now, I don't know about doing backflips and slashing with your sword while poor Nezuko's skull gets jostled around inside the box, but sword fighting after carrying a mini-sized Nezuko on his back for a few miles is something that Tanjiro and other ruckers could totally do without collapsing from complete exhaustion. I've had that question in my head for 6 years, so it feels good to finally give that an answer. Let me know if you enjoyed this more practical look at an anime topic, or if you disagree with some of my conclusions. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.